Welcome into the first edition of New Track Record here in 2023. Caleb Hatch, Justin Kinney. Thanks for joining us on this first episode of the new year. Hello, Justin.
Hello, Caleb. Yes, fresh start. Maybe we can strive to be a better podcast. Maybe have some hint of mediocrity at best. We'll try our best. I mean, no promises, and we probably know it'll go south, but it's new year, new you, right?
Yeah, that is what they say. I did read the other day, though, talking about New Year's resolutions or goals. You're actually better off waiting until like the spring equinox, right around March 20th.
Really?
Because like the days get a lot longer. There's a lot more sunlight by then. Like you're not in the dregs and the dreariness of winter, especially here in the Midwest and the US. It starts to get warmer starting around then.
Yes.
You know, it's
mental
spring.
health is better.
Yeah.
Yes.
So spring, flowers are blooming, trees are trees have buds. You know, like everything is a lot more positive and uplifting. Plus, the IndyCar season started by then. And that's the obvious takeaway.
Yes.
So we've already had St. Pete at that point.
And what else to get you off your ass than IndyCar racing? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you got to find a way to get off the couch the next 2 months and change here.
That's the absolute struggle for the next the doldrums of the entire year, not just not having auto racing, but just January, February. And we've talked about this on our morning show. It's just the most brutal time of the year.
Yes. Thankfully, at least the off season as it goes, plenty to get to since we last talked with you. You have Andretti revealing more details with Andretti Global and their F1 project and teaming up with Cadillac, kind of. We'll get to that a bit later on. We have Juncos' second seat confirmed, and we have Kyle Larson confirmed for the 2024 Indy 500 with Aero McLaren, no SP, as they also had a name change during our break. Just Aero McLaren. Kyle Larson, HendrickCars.com, the sponsor, partnering with Hendrick Motorsports for this entry. But perhaps the biggest story, Justin, that we saw while we were away happened earlier this week, and that is Mug and Bun in Speedway is for sale.
Yes, and we're going through the coffers, seeing if we can scrounge up enough money in the podcast account to see if we can make a serious bid. I think we're going to fall a couple bucks short.
Yeah, I saw the list price for the sale was like $2.1 or $2.2 million. I mean, this is prime real estate in Speedway, to be clear.
Yes.
And it's a pretty big property. There's like the drive-in part. There's like a pizza place. There's even like a residence on property, which I didn't realize that aspect. So there's
it's all
a lot
for sale. The entire property.
Yes, it's essentially, I think, 4 parcels of land. So this is prime real estate. I hope that someone buys it and keeps it and runs it as the restaurant. I guess the guy who is selling it has run it since I think 97 or 98. And he's just looking to retire, and he got into it because he did electrical work for him. And then he just bought it when it came up for sale back then. But if you've not been to Mug and Bun, I recommend going for the root beer. They got some wild sides, a lot of fried stuff. I mean, it's a drive-in after all.
Yes.
I will say this. The breaded tenderloins, I'm not a fan of their breaded tenderloins, but I'm also very picky with my breaded tenderloins. So as a Hoosier.
Are you a guy that loves like the bigger the better?
Yes, but just because it's big doesn't mean it's good.
Correct. I would agree. Like sometimes I feel like they compromise taste just to be huge with tenderloins.
Yes.
Like, oh, look how big it is compared to this small gut bun. It's like, well, it's not very good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's okay if it's the giant size.
As long as it's good.
Really thin, if it's not dry, which is the problem with most breaded tenderloins, is that they're dry.
Yeah.
And then you also, if you get the giant size, it has to have tomato, lettuce.
Don't say it.
Onion.
Okay.
And then you got to put mustard on it.
Okay, I thought you were going to say pickles. No pickles. I can't do pickles.
I love pickles, but pickles aren't a requirement for a true breaded tenderloin in my book. Mayo is a good addition sometimes. As long as you have mustard. Mustard is the key element. That is the necessary condiment on a breaded tenderloin.
For you, I see. I'm a simpleton. I'll go onions, lettuce, ketchup on my breadstick.
Ketchup?
Back off.
Ugh. You probably also put ketchup on your hot dog.
I do.
Ugh.
And mustard.
Yeah, no, you're an adult.
Yeah, I'm an adult.
You're an adult.
So
you don't need to put ketchup on a hot dog. That's for another podcast and for another time. But anyway, back to IndyCar because
you can tie it in if you ever want to buy us anything at the Speedway.
Yeah, take us to Mug and Bun.
Yeah, take notes. Just buy what a 6-year-old would eat for me, and then the refined palate of Mr. Hatch.
Refined palate. We're talking about breaded tenderloins here, which nationally are mocked as far as being the state food of Indiana because it's not officially like the state. I don't know the right word. The state food. I know the governor is actually actively working to like make that a thing.
They're hard at work down there in Indianapolis, aren't they? For the important stuff.
The real issues.
Yeah, the real issues.
To be fair, it should be the state food or whatever. I know the like state pie is sugar cream pie.
Is it?
I believe, yeah.
Yeah.
Which I'm a fan of that. I'm a fan of like everything Hoosier. Like it's disgusting. Like how much like pro Indiana when it comes to like stuff that Hoosiers love. I love the state fair. I love breaded tenderloins. I love basketball. I love racing. I like eating corn on the cob.
You should be in the commercials for the Indiana Visitors Bureau or whatever.
Yes, I should.
Look at this man. See, this is a prototypical Hoosier.
This is Mr. Hoosier.
This is
Mr. Hoosier guy.
Look up Hoosier in the dictionary on Wikipedia, and there's a picture of Caleb Hatch.
and like, I have friends who made fun of me because like in college, I'd always be like to people not from Indiana. I'd say, oh yeah, they're from Indiana. Like I'd always know every celebrity from Indiana or had some sort of tie to the state. It's exhausting. Anyway, let's talk some IndyCar. Mug and Bun is related because it's near the Speedway and highly recommend the root beer. Check it out if you're there in Maine, if you've not been to Mug and Bun, because we don't know how much longer we're going to have Mug and Bun around. You hope it's not bought up for development. But that was the big off-track story. As far as things happening in regards to IndyCar, we start off, obviously, Kyle Larson and McLaren for the Indy 500 set for 2024. Now, we had heard the chatter between Kyle Busch and Kyle Larson, and it felt like Kyle Busch was close at one point getting a deal with McLaren. And then it came down to Menard's sponsorship and the McLaren needing the right papaya orange and that conflicting, obviously, with Menard's colors.
Right.
So that was a non-starter. There are no other Chevy teams that truly had an opening. I mean, Ryan Reinbold has a second car, but we weren't sure on that one. Still a chance from what we read. But, and then the other option was Ed Carpenter Racing, and the inn was essentially full there.
We had said it in the past. Once again, you and I, Correctamundo, is that fourth seat at McLaren was going to be the best chance for a Kyle Larson. And then sure enough, that's happening not in 23, but 24. And by all accounts, not only does it get Kyle Larson in the 500, you have some backing from Hendrick Motorsports and Rick Hendrick, and what that looks like other than maybe some badging, who knows? Maybe it's a big investment. Maybe it's a small investment, but some happy news. And we were trading texts because I know there's a lot of excitement for Kyle Larson to be in the Indianapolis 500. And I was kind of tempering the enthusiasm, but you made a great point. And this is where I'm at too, is Kyle Larson doesn't excite me, but the fact that a top driver in another series is entering the Indianapolis 500 boosts my thoughts about the event still being a worldwide draw. And I think that is what the best part of this is, in my opinion, is I don't move it. Kyle Larson's not going to move the needle too much for me in terms of the month and all that. And I have to see Kyle and blah, blah, blah. But it is in terms of, wow, a top driver in another series is going to race in the marquee event in IndyCar. And I think that's what's cool to me, is it still has that draw.
We've had, and real quick, I'll go down the line of like the appeal we've had with the 500 since the 100th running, which that in and of itself was a big appeal. But yeah, Larson, sponsorship from Hendrick Cars, Rick Hendrick will co-own the entry. So this is something that Adam Stern reporting that they looked at doing it this year, but they settled on next year, which makes sense. I mean,
More time.
This year, once McLaren said they wanted a driver with experience and signed Tony Kanaan, which made sense from what they said at the time, and then they went and signed Tony Kanaan, and that kind of felt like that was it for this year, so they shifted for next year. But you look at the Indy 500. So Montoya gets his second win in 2015. Then the next year in 2016, you have the 100th running. That big appeal, huge crowd, obvious. 2017, Alonso comes over. 2018, Danica Patrick comes back for her final race, her final Indy 500. Let's see, where are we at now? 2019. Alonso comes back, fails to qualify.
Yes.
2020, yes, you had the pandemic, but Alonso did come back, made the race. Not as big of a storyline, but it's still big that he came back after that failed attempt.
Right.
Then in 2021, Elio is there with a different team for the first time ever, because he'd been with Penske since his first win in 2001, wins his fourth. Now, I get that's a storyline that was more so happening after during the race than before, but Elio there with a new team, and then obviously the TV rating reflected that. Then last year, 2022, so we had Jimmie Johnson, his first Indy 500.
Yep.
This year, we honestly don't really have
nothing.
Don't really have a big storyline to get to, but it just goes to show. I mean, that's momentum you're seeing year to year to year, where it felt like it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yes, and it's huge because once again it shows that this is still a draw, and it's interesting for drivers to want to compete in it. And we always knew it would be inevitable that Kyle Larson would do this. I am surprised that he's doing it this early in his career, if that makes sense, because we're seeing Jimmie Johnson, of course, doing it after the fact, and I could see Kyle Larson maybe doing more in terms of his success in NASCAR, but he's always been a guy, of course, that's a versatile driver. He's an old school guy in that respect. He'll drive anything. He'll get in a seat and anywhere and compete, and it's great to see for him to do it really in the prime of his career. Is he's not waiting until he's checked a lot of boxes in Cup and maybe doing this at the tail end like we've seen other drivers do,
like Kurt Busch, Jimmie Johnson,
even a Fernando Alonso that he had done so much in Formula One before doing this. So to see that and how we're seeing it is pretty impressive and cool. And now I just hope it goes tremendously well for Kyle Larson, and it's not merely a one and done type thing. I don't see him doing it every year, obviously, but I could see him doing it multiple times with how it goes.
So he is set to do the double as well. So he'll become the first driver to do the double since Kurt Busch in 2014. And the other drivers, you have obviously Kurt Busch, I just mentioned, Tony Stewart, Robbie Gordon, Johnny Andretti. Am I missing anyone else? I think that's it.
No, I don't think so. You mentioned Busch. Kurt Busch, yeah. Very few.
So it's a
Robbie
short
Gordon,
list, and I think Kyle Larson, I mean, right up there with Tony Stewart as far as the best of the best, champion in his series. Obviously, Tony Stewart is champion in the IRL and in NASCAR. Kurt Busch won in NASCAR, but this was later on in his career. Still a good driver at the time, but this is perhaps the best all-around race car driver we have right now, like worldwide, as far as his ability to do different
in terms
disciplines.
of versatility, yes. And so for this too, I think an interesting question will be how much seat time is Kyle Larson able to put in? Do we see him doing maybe the open test at Indy? Maybe not this year, but would you be surprised if he did it this year? Maybe surprised because you want people in the seat that are going to race. Yeah,
I would assume Kanaan would do the open test this year.
But would you have an extra entry to do just the test? Would you see it maybe in the fall when they do a traditional small team test ish? Do you see? I don't see Kyle Larson racing another race before the 500. But is he going to be able to take part in all week of practice? Is he going to be there with qualifying? Because that's what the All-Star race weekend is, qualifying weekend.
Yes.
So how does that look for Kyle Larson? So I think those are questions. How much seat time is he able to get on the speedway? Is he here all week for practice? Does all that stuff? Does he have any seat time before? I would imagine he does the spring test next year. But I think those are all storylines to watch, because I have to imagine if Kyle Larson has pushed himself to do this and committed to it, that he wants to have maximum seat time, if at all possible.
So Nathan Brown of the Indy Star, who reported that this announcement came 500 days left until the 2024 Indy 500. It's like they did this intentionally. I mean, considering everyone had this when the embargo ended, like ASAP, whenever it was this afternoon. What was it, like 1 o'clock, 1:30, 2 o'clock, whatever.
Yeah.
But Brown reporting that he is expected to do a day on a non-IMS oval, rookie orientation program months ahead, and then obviously practice qualifying the whole gamut in May. But this is really exciting, and even though it's more than a year away, I think the fact that there'll be the ability to build buzz and promote it well in advance, I think kind of adds to the intrigue of the entry.
And I think we've always kind of complained, or not, maybe not us, but the lack of practice time with just being a week. But look at it this way for Cup drivers, for instance, is you're not missing a points race over the course of those 2 weeks for the week of practice. And then you have the All-Star race that it's not required for you to race in that. And then you have qualifying weekend, and then you go into the event the week after, of course, and then you just start in the back for the Coke 600. I mean, you're not missing a points race whatsoever. So conceivably you can do it. If you can get your team to sign off and all that, which is really the biggest issue, you're not missing any points races in the Cup season, which for a lot of these drivers, of course, is very important.
Yeah. And they tried to get Kyle Busch. They couldn't get that deal locked in, as we mentioned. They signed Tony Kanaan for this year, and this could perhaps be his last appearance. But there was an opening in their release. There was an opening in 2024 for the lineup. So that's kind of how we should frame this, is that this is it for Kanaan, at least at McLaren, for the Indy 500.
Here's how it's going to go. So 24 is going to be Kyle Larson. 25 is going to be Kyle Busch. 26 is going to be Agustin Cindric.
I could see Agustin Cindric doing it, but it would make more sense if he did it in a Penske car.
Right? Well, maybe Penske's still trying to figure their crap out at the Speedway in 26. So
true. They have struggled.
They have work to do before they're adding cars.
That is true. So Kyle Larson, look, there's nothing negative to say about this. This is all positive news.
Came out and said today on a was it a tweet or whatever, that the biggest race in his career is going to be 2024. So he's already hyping up the buzz in that respect. So. And I think it also gives maybe some IndyCar fans more of a reason to maybe tune in to NASCAR in 2023 and watch Kyle Larson and maybe have a bit of a rooting interest there, knowing that he's coming to Indy in 24.
But we could have a driver attempt to do the double this year.
What?
Jimmie Johnson says the Indy 500 still in play. Chip Ganassi Racing awaiting a decision from him because of engine allocation. He can run Honda in the Indy 500 as a Chevy NASCAR guy. That's from Jenna Fryer of the AP, their motorsports reporter. And in fact, he's now a team owner in NASCAR. Remember, he is now with Legacy Motor Club.
It was the old formerly Richard Petty Motorsports, yes.
Petty GMS. He'll drive the 84. He'll be in the Daytona 500 with an entry sponsored by Carvana for that. Also, the All-Star race is high on his list because it's at North Wilkesboro, but that is a conflict with Indy 500 qualifying. So
correct.
That's up in the air. But again, I think these decisions will be made here before St. Pete. So we'll have an answer in the next couple of weeks.
I just don't see Jimmie Johnson. North Wilkesboro has a lot of hype around that for the All-Star race, and for good reason, because it's just a grassroots, old school, old NASCAR track. And I think Dale Jr. is racing in that race. There's a lot of hype around that North Wilkesboro event. And I just don't see JJ not participating in that for qualifying. I'd be kind of surprised at this point if Jimmie Johnson does the 500 in 2023.
If he does, great. If not, we at least have Kyle Larson to look forward to in 2024. Yeah. Plus, I mean, the way the field is filled out, I mean, this is going to be a very deep field with a lot of former winners in it, and we could expect at least one more former winner to pick up a seat for the Indy 500. That seems to be clear, and we'll get to that on more
Buddy
silly
Rice?
Seasons. Not quite.
Oh, okay.
Not quite. Correct team, but wrong driver.
Okay.
But that's a look. And it's something I've saw multiple people point out on Twitter today as we record on Thursday, January 12th here, is that just how happy and thrilled Robin Miller would be to see this, because I mean, he lobbied for Kyle Larson to run in the Indy 500 for years and years and years. He was never given the opportunity when he was at Ganassi. Larson wasn't. And then he won a championship when he went to Hendrick. And now we're finally seeing this happen.
And you can imagine the lead to the story about all the negatives of IndyCar since the season ended, and this brightening up significantly the offseason, finally this happening. So yeah, somewhere Robin Miller is definitely smiling a big smile with this news today.
Other news that we had as far as silly season and announcements for 2023, not a surprise, but Juncos Hollinger Racing announced that is it Agustin or Augustine? I've not quite figured that out yet.
I think it's Agustin
Canapino, the Argentinian, will be the driver of the second Juncos Hollinger car for IndyCar. Full season deal. I think that's a bit of a surprise. He'll have funding from a tourism agency in Argentina, so that's a good sign. And also with the Circuit de Termas de Rio Hondo, which is one of the circuits he did a test at. So in Pro Tour, which is the Argentinian kind of tourism bureau, the National Bureau of Tourism Promotion Agency, they'll have a Visit Argentina campaign across the 17 race calendar, also again sponsored by that other circuit. First Argentinian driver since Juan Manuel Fangio II, drove for Dan Gurney's All-American Racers in 1997 in kart.
You made a good comparison today. You're interested on how this goes compared to JJ's inaugural season, because I think you see a lot of similarities in terms of at least the lack of experience in certain disciplines. But look, if from what it was discussed, significant sponsorship came as a result of this, and we saw the crowd that was down in Argentina when they did some trials, some run laps down there, and the expectation, hopefully, is this leads to greater opportunities in Argentina, maybe even a race in 2024. So this is a cool step towards that. And why not? Argentinian owner should have an Argentinian driver, in my opinion. So happy to see Canapino on board. Older guy, I guess, by auto racing standards these days at 32. But we'll see what kind of performance he can have, and definitely a guy that's going to be learning on the fly. But really cool news, because I think this is maybe maybe not the first step, because we've already seen those first steps, but the next step into a greater IndyCar presence in Argentina.
Yeah, this feels like step two. Step one was getting the exhibition runs that he had in Buenos Aires, and then the other one at Circuit de Rio Hondo, which is kind of in like one of those resort areas in Argentina, where this race would be held if IndyCar does run a race there, most likely. But getting him to do those demonstration runs, and then now getting a full season, that's step two. Step three, obviously, will be holding the race itself, which 2024, I don't know. I've seen people say, that doesn't seem likely for 2024. But look, I mean, they've made it this far, and we saw the crowds that came out for those demonstration runs.
I just don't know what the delay would be.
It just comes down to, will they pay the freight costs?
I get it.
That's the biggest thing, as always. And I think there are a lot of positives, especially because this is some place that they could race, due to it being Southern Hemisphere, they could race
earlier
or later. Yeah, either one. And that work, and the time zones work out well, because it's like 2 hours ahead of Eastern time.
Yeah, it's not Motegi. You're racing in the middle of the night, So yeah, hopefully it works out, but I would imagine particularly with these sponsors. So you get the sponsors into the sport, they start coming to races, they come to the 500, you know how it is, schmoozing sponsors and all that. Then all of a sudden their $5 million commitment yearly could become $10 million yearly, or hey, we'll put up $15 million to front some of the money to bring you to Argentina. So those kind of things, I think, grow and foster those relationships, and it starts here. So pretty excited.
Yes, and I think the other thing is, you could say, well, he doesn't have a lot of single-seater experience. Well, he ran for Juncos' IMSA team in 2019.
Yeah.
Ran at the 24 Hours at Daytona. I looked up his test times, and look, I get it. Test times are
I thought we don't talk about test times here.
They're not indicative of race weekends. But I just wanted to see a comparison as far as his Sebring test that he had last year, I think in October. And he did well enough in that test for IndyCar to give the go-ahead for those demo runs in Argentina. So that's check one.
Right.
Check two, I looked at it, and he was at Sebring, which is a very fast course. So
yeah,
you can make up a lot of time or lose a lot of time. It doesn't take much, but he was within a second and a half of the top test time at his test, which, again, everyone's working on different programs. I don't know if they're using red tires for those, for example. So yeah, it's not like he was crazy off the pace. I get it's going to be a huge learning curve for him, especially on street circuits, as expected. I mean, St. Pete's going to be really tough. Let's not kid ourselves. But as the season goes on, as he gets more experience, you get to just like Jimmie Johnson, I said, you get to the second IMS road course race. If you see progress, and we saw progress in Jimmy's year one, if we see progress for Canapino, I think there's some good thoughts to have. And again, he'll get a ton of seat time. Thermal Club coming up here in just a couple weeks for the spring training, if you will, in California.
And this is a greater opportunity for IndyCar and Juncos Racing than just results on track, because more Argentinians will be interested in watching because of this. And that can only help the popularity of the sport in Argentina and South America. So this is not merely okay, we're bringing this guy in and hopefully he can compete for top tens. It's let's get this guy here and continue to grow the interest in IndyCar down in Argentina.
And again, it's not going to be a 1-year thing. I hope it's a multi-year deal. They've not said that it is, but I hope he gets more than 1 year to kind of showcase his abilities, because year one is just going to be a big learning curve, and you hope you see improvement by the end of the year. And I think the other thing is, you talk about the schedule in Argentina. Jay Fry has mentioned this on the record. He wants to get IndyCar to 20 races. Well, Argentina would be a key market for them to join. Thanks to Ricardo Juncos and his efforts, they're making progress there. Obviously, Mexico's another one. And then you can always add races in the U.S. or a second race in Canada. I mean, these are your options. You want to stay here, maybe a race in Brazil. But I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, just due to everything going on down there politically.
Yeah, they got some issues.
But this is how you get there. It's one step at a time, and you keep the races you have on the schedule, which they've done a good job of the last couple of seasons. And then you find markets where you can add, and Argentina's a market, Mexico's a market. There are obviously more tracks that you can add in the U.S., and perhaps if the right thing comes along, we haven't heard of it, but Canada, obviously another option.
There are very few places in the world, let alone in North America and South America, that are clamoring for IndyCar to come to their venue or their state or their country. And Argentina is one of them. And if you're IndyCar, you need to strike when that opportunity is there, and hopefully financially they can work it out. But I think this, in terms of Canapino in a seat, further boosts that chance, that opportunity for IndyCar down the line to go to Argentina.
So we'll see, but this is as far as we've come for one of these. I know they kind of had that dalliance with Australia a couple years ago to bring a race back to surfers.
With surfers. Yeah,
it never really seemed to get off the ground, but this seems like there's some actual work going on behind the scenes to get a deal done.
And I think the difference between Argentina and surfers is I never felt that surfers was as excited or energetic about IndyCar returning as IndyCar fans were. They were not willing to move much in the way of schedule, right? Because they ran with, who did they run with?
Supercars.
Yeah, supercars. And they weren't going to mess with the supercar schedule with surfers. So, and that was really up against, it didn't work out for IndyCar in terms of the schedule. So there just never seemed to me a real desire in Australia for IndyCar to come back, to really make the decisions or make the changes to accommodate IndyCar as best they could. But I get the feeling that maybe Argentina will be a little bit more accommodating in terms of what works best for the series.
Yeah, they've had MotoGP in recent years, but I mean, they haven't had F1 in 30 years or something?
Like 30 years, yeah. I don't think. And
you got to remember, they have some of the great drivers in F1.
Yeah,
going back to the very beginning. So Argentina has a lot of ties to that, and they're a motorsports country, just like Brazil, and obviously Colombia is in South America as well. So there's a lot of demand and desire to get Motorsports and more expansion there, and hopefully that happens for 2024 for IndyCar. It seems like a long shot now, but
yeah,
we'll see how this season goes.
This may not move the needle, today's news from Juncos, as much in the States as it does in Argentina.
Yeah, there it's a very big deal.
And that's what the important thing is in terms of growing the footprint of the sport. I don't need every piece of news to wow me, but if it wows somebody else somewhere else, then that's a good thing for the series.
Just like the Kyle Larson Indy 500.
Yes, see?
You know?
More people than I are excited about it.
Well, because we're going to watch regardless.
Yes.
But to an outsider, that's your pull.
Yeah.
That's your reason to watch. Like last year was Jimmie Johnson in the Indy 500, and he actually qualified well.
Yeah.
And you thought, wow, does he have a chance to win or challenge for the win?
Yeah.
And it didn't go as planned during the race, but everything leading up to that, he was a storyline and a good one. So
yeah, I mean, I just got a text 5 minutes ago here while we're recording from a buddy of mine that casually watches racing, but not very much. That texted me about sounds like Larson could do the double, and I'm saying, well, he is doing the double in 24. So already being on the radar of more casual sports fans and auto racing fans, and that's the goal when you have these types of situations and these drivers commit to it is broaden the interest in terms of the event, and definitely Kyle Larson's doing that.
All right, elsewhere on silly season news rumors. So Marshall Pruett, another silly season update, and this one from a couple days ago. So we since got the Juncos second car announcement. Not that that's a surprise. Takuma Sato expected to be the driver for the ovals for the Ganassi 11 car. Marcus Armstrong running road and street course races. So that's the expectation there. And now as far as Dale Coyne Racing, they have an open seat, the number 51 car that with Rick Ware Racing that Sato was in last year. That is expected to be Stingray Robb in a full season. And then as far as that goes, that's it for full time, and then the open entries.
That's a wrap. That'd be 27, right?
Yeah, and then the only other note, Ryan Hunter-Reay working on something for the Indy 500. That for Marshall Pruett in the Racer.com mailbag.
What's the open seat? I mean, do you think Ed Carpenter Racing?
I would say Ray Hall would be my guess, but it's not real clear. Is it just the Indy 500? Is it the entire month of May in both races? There's not really any,
right.
Or perhaps something more than that. I know Ray Hall's been looking to expand, and they've done that last couple of years, but who knows? Maybe he runs a handful of races. We'll see.
We shall see. Wouldn't mind some RHR. More RHR is always good.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And anytime you can add an Indy 500 winner back into the mix for the Indy 500 and another race, I mean, that's a positive.
Yes, absolutely.
Even though I know it's not Buddy Rice. I know that's what you wanted.
Womp womp. And his straight build hat.
Yes.
Legend.
Yes. So that's where we stand on that. All right. The next big topic. It's crazy that this got shuffled so far down the order, but this related to IndyCar because Andretti Autosport, well, Michael Andretti, announced that Andretti Global, which is their Formula One effort for the future, announced that they have paired up with Cadillac for an F1 entry. Now, on the surface, you thought, whoa, this is a big deal. Cadillac coming over as an OEM. You read a little bit more into it, and they're really just keeping that Renault partnership that they had already announced, and then it'll be badged as Cadillac, is the way I understand it from reading things.
Yeah, so this is not a Cadillac from the ground up operation to where they're investing millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into building a power plant and designing and all this stuff. This is merely paying for badging the car as Cadillac.
Yes.
The power plant as Cadillac. So
it's a sponsorship deal.
Yes, it's basically a sponsorship deal.
We've seen this before. So Alfa Romeo and Ferrari. We've had Tag Heuer and Red Bull with Honda at the time.
Yeah,
we saw
with Honda.
Red Bull with Infinity when it was actually Renault, I think, at that time. So we've seen this over the years. This is not a new thing. Aston Martin, where it's really Mercedes-Benz.
Right.
But they use Mercedes-Benz engines in their road cars, to be clear. So that's kind of a way that's a little bit different.
Yes.
But this is essentially a sponsorship deal. Now, if GM does go on to become a full power unit when they have the new regulations, 2026,
which is
onward,
an option right now.
That's an option.
What we're hearing is it could be an option, but
more likely it would be until what, like 2030 or so, I've seen.
Yeah, I feel like for GM, it's a good play because it gets you into Formula One without having to spend the immense amounts of money that it takes to get in Formula One. And this has even come up in terms of a loophole in the rules with Formula One and closing that loophole, allowing this, because it does prevent, I guess it gets you on the radar just as much as Mercedes and Ferrari, but you're not having to put hundreds of millions of dollars into the effort. So yeah, on the surface, it sounds tremendous for GM to be going into Formula One, but it's merely a sponsorship deal. Let's be honest.
It's a partnership for the Cadillac brand to enter F1. And yes, it is GM's first foray into that, but
it's not a true foray to me. It's not truly jumping into the deep end. They're merely sitting on the steps in the shallow end and watching everybody play in the deep end and want to be a part of it, but they're scared of the deep end, basically. That's what it is. Or not willing to commit financially to the deep end. So they're in the same pool. They're just not in the same area of the pool.
And meanwhile, before all that, Andretti Autosport announced a long-term partnership with Wayne Taylor Racing. So they purchased an ownership stake in one of the top teams in IMSA. They're an Acura team currently. They've been with Cadillac before, go figure. But so that also a big deal. And then you have Cadillac on board for this F1, go figure. That was done in sync.
Coincidence? I don't think so.
Yeah,
right?
I don't think so at all. And some of the other things with this deal. So I thought, and I tweeted this and I got a lot of people saying, like, well, it doesn't matter. They partner with different teams. So I said, Andretti, a Honda team in IndyCar, with Cadillac potentially, if this entry goes through, a GM brand in Formula One. And people say, well, Penske had Acura and IMSA and now has Porsche, and then they have Ford and NASCAR and IndyCar. They have Chevy, or Ganassi has Cadillac and IMSA and Honda. Right. That's not what I was getting at with this, to be clear. It was more of, if Andretti is going to go with a GM brand,
then why wouldn't they Cadillac, be with a GM brand in IndyCar?
Yes. And what does that mean for the future? I'm not talking right now.
Right.
I'm talking for the future. And I'm not necessarily saying Chevy. So I thought, that's interesting. What does this mean for Cadillac? You know, why would it, like, I don't think Honda or GM are going to be completely cool with, because I get it on like sports car to IndyCar to NASCAR. That's different. That's a domestic. This is a global thing we're talking with Formula One. Right. Much bigger deal. A lot more brand awareness, and you would think that Cadillac would want exclusivity with the partnerships as far as at least on the IndyCar level. At least that's what I thought. I don't know if I'm off base here, but I was thinking about this, and then go figure, I heard from IndyCar Deep Throat talking about this, and I think a lot of people are worried, well, so does that mean Andretti's going to go to Chevy? That's not what I was thinking for this necessarily.
Okay.
I thought maybe this opens up other opportunities for other brands, and that's exactly what IndyCar Deep Throat telling me with this. So Andretti plans on bringing Cadillac into IndyCar as their primary OEM partner if the FIA bid goes through for Formula One. So GM and Cadillac, they have a ton of money to invest, willing to go the IndyCar route if the F1 route happens, and help with finances, PR, increase of business development. Includes a massive motorsport contract between Cadillac and Andretti across the board. For example, IMSA, Wayne Taylor Racing, they're already Cadillac. F1, it would be Cadillac. And I get that's badging and branding.
And you're saying if they're in Indy,
it would be a Cadillac team.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what I thought.
But would they build their own power unit, let's say, because I just don't know. I'm not smart enough to know how this works with both being under the GM banner, both Chevy and Cadillac.
So they wouldn't build, they'd still use the Ilmor engine.
Yes, but it would just be branded Cadillac.
I believe so. So, for example, and people say, well, this doesn't happen in IndyCar. Yes, this has happened before. We've seen Acura branded engine for Long Beach when Acura took over as a sponsor.
Well, you had Cosworth engines that were never Cosworth, right?
And then way back in the day, the Indy 500, you had Chevys competing, you had Buicks competing at the same time.
Yeah.
So, and IndyCar Deep Throat goes on to say the numbers from the source, a 10 to 15 year agreement between GM and Andretti. There'd be a timeline for ending other partnerships like Honda on the clock, and Cadillac looking to be a separate identity from the GM group moving forward. So they'd be under the same company as Chevy, but run as differently as companies. So think about it like this. You know how, like with Chrysler, they have Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram.
Yeah.
Notice how Ram is like split off
from Dodge.
From Dodge.
Yes.
It's not Dodge Ram. It's just Ram.
Yeah.
And so they've made a conscious effort there in that organization, that automaker, to do that. And you would think it's essentially the same kind of thing with Cadillac as a luxury brand, or like we've seen with Corvette, for example. Yes, is a Chevy, but there's no Chevy logo on a Corvette anywhere, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it's the same kind of concept. And I guess that's how I saw this playing out. And again, this is not an immediate thing because these contracts and these take years. And Andretti, rumors they nearly switched to Chevy a couple of years ago when their contract was up with Honda. I'm guessing the manufacturer contracts for teams in IndyCar are at a minimum 2 years and perhaps 3.
Yeah.
Like you're not signing teams on 1 year deals. So
all of a sudden we should
shift.
IndyCar fans should root for the Andretti effort in Formula One if, per what IndyCar Deep Throat says, it could be then Cadillac and IndyCar if that comes to fruition.
Yeah, that's a possibility on the table, which I thought, again, if you're going to buy Wayne Taylor Racing and buy a stake in it, and we don't know how large that stake is, but my guess is eventually it's 100%, because why else would you do something like that? It's not a threat to the IndyCar GM program. They made that clear. GM officials have made that clear. And nothing's changing in IndyCar and IMSA. They're still committed with those series and those opportunities. So to me, this is more of an expansion than a subtraction or a shifting. This is an addition. And I think this is one of those things that will help, because anytime you're trying to relaunch a car brand or make something different, you want to make sure it's exclusive. And
right. Which Cadillac is an exclusive type.
Is trying to do here.
And Cadillac is, let's be honest, an exclusive. Is it considered a luxury brand?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it's different from Chevy in that respect, and it's trying to be exclusive. And what's more exclusive than getting into Formula One, no matter how that looks, whether you're a brand sponsor or an actual original OEM. So it sounds like a concerted effort too by Cadillac across multiple race series. And could that include IndyCar? I mean, at this point now, all of a sudden we're rooting for this thing to work out for Andretti. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have budged of the majority of opinions in Formula One quite yet.
Yeah, we'll see how this plays out. But again, that's more my line of thinking. And when I was sent that, I thought, wow, so this kind of has some legs to it. And I'm not just being a crazy person here. There's some actual potential here. Not saying it's going to happen, but those are the discussions. Those are the ideas for the future. And again, you don't do something like that and stay with Honda and IndyCar and have them separate. I mean, it's way bigger. We're not talking IMSA and NASCAR. We're talking global and branding for a team. You don't see a Ferrari F1 and then a Ferrari based team, in WEC, for example, that shifts away. Like that's
right.
Essentially the factory team, if you will.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's if you're in one discipline with one OEM and then you're in another discipline with the same OEM in there and you're not with them, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
It seems like, right?
Yeah. We're talking if Andretti and GM is not just a sponsorship branding thing and becomes a factory, like OEM effort for GM and Cadillac in Formula One down the road. Again, we're not talking in 2 years or whatever. We're talking, or 2 or 3 years. We're talking,
5, 6, 7. Yeah.
2030, 2028. Yeah. There's that possibility. We'll see how it plays out. Again, he's got to get the F1 entry approved, and from everything we've read,
is the biggest hurdle of all this stuff, right?
That's the hurdle between Cadillac being a branding exercise for now, that doesn't help. We thought, oh, that makes it a done deal. But again, they're not building the power unit.
Right.
It's a Renault branded thing. And then he has support of Renault for obvious reasons.
And McLaren.
But then McLaren dropped their support.
Did they?
After this. Not that I think Zach Brown doesn't want his friend in Formula One. I just think it's deeper than that.
Yeah.
And so you got to provide value, and there's a ton of information on it. And we're not going to do a deep dive on every little item of this because we're primarily focused on IndyCar.
Yeah.
But essentially it's the dilution. It's the fact that Andretti's been very public about this instead of just working behind the scenes, because FOM is said that there are other interested teams and manufacturers beyond Andretti.
Yeah,
that's just the only one we know.
That are much quieter about it and probably trying to go with things more diplomatically. But Andretti is very much vocal in their desire and also why they haven't been able to be getting in. So it's rubbing people the wrong way. I don't think anybody's entirely blameless out of this thing. I think Andretti could have went about this better, but I also think the FIA is, well, maybe not the FIA as much as the team principals are just set in their ways and don't want to think outside the box in terms of growing the sport. So everybody has a little bit of blame, but in the end, the people in power are the ones making the decisions, and that's FIA and the team principals. And so far right now, there's just not enough support for Andretti to get in as Team 11.
And the other notes is that Ford was rumored to be in the picture. And of course, Ford's going to find a way to, try to block this. Porsche is in the picture as well. And there's just a sense that they aren't as attractive as a bid as we thought, as far as the Andretti bid. Yeah,
it sounded great at the beginning. And then there was outrage on why the F1 wasn't more receptive, but as you do a deeper dive, you can see it's not as big of an investment as it was initially thought.
And it doesn't help that Andretti has the support of the FIA as they're feuding with FOM, which is Formula One management, essentially the teams.
Yes. And now FIA, this will be the last point on this subject, is the FIA has control to make decisions on who is admitted to Formula One. But the team principals vote on certain things that would make it impossible for a new team to participate if the team principals don't agree. So FIA tomorrow could say, yeah, Andretti, you're in, but certain elements of being able to participate and compete in Formula One reside on, or really come down to if the team principals vote on it. So that's kind of the issue here is, yeah, the FIA could say they want to expand, but if all 10 teams, or at least the majority of teams, aren't on board with it, it can't happen.
And one other note on all this craziness. So this from a Forbes.com article by Bruce Martin. Andretti also revealed to me, that's Bruce saying that he intends to pursue a NASCAR Cup Series team once he gets a Formula One team admitted into the Formula One World Championship. Andretti said, we have to make sure we get into NASCAR in a few years. And we've heard this in years past that they pursued a NASCAR entry. That's not a surprise. It just goes to show that how far this team has come since it was
Andretti Green.
Yeah, to Andretti Autosport. It was a rough couple of first years as just Michael in charge, but they've come a long way.
Have definitely built a racing empire. It was a driving empire of the Andretti. It's now become a racing empire. Not just drivers dominating, it's actually team and very much a corporation now.
Let us know what you think. There are plenty of ways you can interact with us. You can find us at newtrackrecordpodcast.com. While you're there, sign up for the email list. It is free to subscribe, and you'll never miss an episode or any special announcements we have throughout the year. So be sure to sign up for that. Also, you can follow us on social media. Our Twitter handle is IndyCar Podcast. On Facebook, like us, just search for New Track Record. Instagram, IndyCar Podcast, the handle as well. You can email us, newtrackrecordpodcast@gmail.com, and you can become a supporter on Patreon, patreon.com/newtrackrecord. We have supporter tiers. It starts at just $1 a month. That's all it takes. Thanks to Xavier, Rob, and other supporters. Again, patreon.com/newtrackrecord, where you can join in and support. And As always, you can follow us for free on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, or others. Each and every week we have episodes. Okay, time for the mailbag. And despite being off for a couple of weeks for our annual Christmas break, this is planned. Like we do this every year. This is not like a new thing. So first off, you asked this question the other week as far as where does IndyCar kind of stand as the year wraps up and how do you feel about everything? So you posted the poll. That was a good poll question. In a better place or in a worse place? And unfortunately, now, before today's news, mind you, I think that kind of changes things. But 50.6% said in a worse place, 49.4% said in a better place. So nearly dead even.
Found it fascinating with that voting and a lot of responses as well to the question.
Yes. So looking at the replies, Jamin T14 said, it feels like we're just treading water while staying afloat, and riding the waves keeps you going. It also doesn't get you anywhere. Not moving forward leads to everything passing you by.
Yeah. Some days it feels like that. Most days.
This from Aaron J. Richmond. Better, the fact there will be 27 full-time entrants is amazing. That hasn't happened in decades. Yeah, this is a kart-level field. Unfortunately, we don't have the OEM support, multiple chassis, the sponsorship, but we do have a better TV deal.
Yes, we do.
We have a streaming series.
Yeah, we shouldn't overlook those things.
And yes, you don't have as many international races and things like that. But look, the events that are on the schedule are relatively healthy, and that's something to be positive. And everything you hear about kart in the 80s and 90s, yes, those are the nostalgia days. Is everything kind of overblown though, as far as the numbers and the crowds? Probably, yes. That's just how that works.
But 27 full-time entries, that's a positive, right, for 2023. So you can find some silver lining, but I think in terms of the future of the series, I think there's still a lot of questions.
This from Zach C8771. Last year, I just had more abstract hope of progress. So if I'm choosing, it's worse. I don't think it's in a bad spot, but another year with no movement on a third OEM or new chassis, the Iowa concerts make for a profitable event, I'm sure. But not much else I see growing the sport. Fair?
Yes.
Poet Shevchenko, right now we have theoretical positives and actual negatives. Till the promised improvements materialize, I will say worse off. Run_Mark_run seems like a pretty stagnant offseason to this point. It was.
Well, I think even to Thursday as we're recording, so the Kyle Larson news, okay, that doesn't take effect till 2024.
True.
Okay. I think, and we'll get to it here shortly, the Indy Lights improvement in terms of the new deal and the monetary stuff for that helps immediately, right? So it's those things. Yeah, sure. Kyle Larson, I think it moves the needle for you for a day, a weekend, a couple weeks, but what does it do long term for the sport? I think that's a great question. But in terms of making decisions, of making impacts that affect the entire series, the entire season, yeah, we're still kind of waiting for those things.
Tyler_Allen says, I'd say stagnant to worse. They didn't capitalize on the massive momentum from a couple years ago. Granted, the pandemic didn't help. Yeah, I mean, they were building up slowly. And in 2019, you felt like there was a lot of growth. And then with the pandemic, you have Drive to Survive come out and then people getting interested. And then Grosjean comes over. That helps. It's a process. And it seems like it's a long and slow one at that.
I just feel like, and I mentioned this to you a couple days ago, that Roger Penske is not the most visible president of a major auto racing series. I mean, you have Steve Phelps, you see him a lot out there for NASCAR. You have what's the FIA president's name? Mohammed bin Sulayem or whatever. Yeah, he's out there making comments all the time. I don't know quite honestly if it's a health thing with Roger. I mean, he's an old guy, right? And so I know it's always talked about how relentless and how much of a workaholic he is, yet we never hear from him. We never see him. So it's always very much news when somebody gets an interview with him about IndyCar and asks some questions. So I've expected more out of Roger and his organization and his team. and I don't think I'm alone in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair with F1, so Liberty Media bought it a few years back. Chase Carey was in charge. He stepped down. Ross Braun is managing director, longtime F1 guy. Stefano Domenicali is president and in charge. Worked for Ferrari for a long time. Worked for Lamborghini. So, I mean, they're well-versed in those sports. I feel like Domenicali, though, is more visible than, say, Roger Penske.
Yeah, I would agree. And I'm not saying that the reason why the series is stagnant is because we don't see Roger out there, but I'm also concerned about just how much he isn't out there in terms of being the face of the series, of making things happen, all that stuff. And he's an advanced age dude, man. He's an old guy. And so, in this country, there's always people talking about the viability of our president running for another term because he's so old, and he's younger than Roger Penske. So let's make no mistake. This is a dude that has a lot of mileage and has been around forever and has done a lot of great things, but he's also a dude that's not getting any younger. And I think the succession plan, I'm sure, is already in place for IndyCar if and when something happens to Roger. My thing is we just haven't seen those dynamic developments in this series that we expected when Roger Penske took the series and IMS over. And we've had that conversation ad nauseum. But the fact of the matter is, I still think he's left a lot to be desired in terms of what we thought this series would look like heading into 2023 when Roger Penske took over. And that's even considering the pandemic in that respect. I mean, we're 2 years removed now, getting 2 years removed from the worst of the pandemic. And yet here we are still kind of stagnant with the series.
So our annual favorite off-season article.
You sent it to me.
Headline from Racer.com. Foyt team completes engineering and management overhaul. So again, they're announcing some new guys, and they did get a pretty big get. Michael Cannon coming to be Santino Ferrucci's engineer. That's a pretty big deal to get him on board. But as always, we get this story every offseason. NK Harden saying Control C, Control V.
It very much is. Seriously.
And then also saying, come on, man, haven't we read this same story every year for the last 15 years? Hope it actually helps this time, but we've seen this movie before. We know how it ends. It's
very much like ad-libs. Like the majority of the shell of the story is there. It's just underlines where you're inserting names and all that
New
stuff.
Names,
it's
right?
Very much, that's all it is. And I joke, but it's serious. I can't even read it because it's just so absurd. And it's coming every single offseason. Our Foyt update with the engineering and all that stuff and behind the scenes. We always get it every single year. And the results, they never change.
I hope they change this year. That's all I'll say.
And to be clear, 10 years.
We're always rooting for Foyt.
Yes.
We want to see them succeed.
I would love to see them succeed, yes.
But until we see it happen on the track, we'll be skeptical.
And I will be vocal in my criticism.
And if they do succeed, we'll be vocal in their success. Absolutely.
We're the first ones that anytime Foyt gets a top 10 or something, we will sing their praises.
Oh, yeah. No doubt.
Right? Because we're hoping that it turns around. But it never does. Doesn't matter who they hired in the offseason. Doesn't matter who they got rid of in the offseason. It's the same results.
This from Jeremy from HBG. Just thanks for tagging us. There's more news. Insider Gaming. Sources, motorsport games developers threaten lawsuit over unpaid wages. That's the same entity that is doing the IndyCar game that's supposed to come out May of this year. Yeah, I don't think that's happening.
Yeah, what is it, January? We haven't seen any news about it. We haven't seen any screenshots. We haven't seen any trailers. We haven't seen any detailed interviews with developers. This isn't happening. Right. And somebody that still at 40 years old, I don't game a tremendous amount, but I know the process that comes with making a game and marketing a game is the fact that you're conceivably 4 months out of the release of this thing. And we haven't seen a damn thing. I don't remember seeing anything development related other than, was it last Indy 500 where they had all those cameras set up and they were getting people's drivers and other personalities' face shots.
Yeah, they had a little sim thing you could do in the fan zone.
Really? I don't even remember that. That's the last thing we've seen. And this was 8 months ago. So no, this is this is right now. It's not happening, and if it does, it's going to be an absolute dud. If it does come out in May,
yeah,
I can't imagine anything.
I will be
less.
shocked if this game comes out in May in time for the Indy 500. Shocked.
And that I've debated this too, and asked Adam Stern about this. What's better, delaying the game, or and having it be good, or releasing it and have it being a stinker?
You're better off delaying the release.
I totally agree.
I don't think that's even close.
Yeah.
I was curious, and this was after the F1 news the other day, earlier this week. I was just curious, like, as far as our audience, at least on Twitter, I mean, it's not a comprehensive, this is not accurate data polling here.
Right.
But of IndyCar fans, do you also follow F1? And 64% of you said yes, both. 36% said no, just IndyCar. A few responses. Arkle said yeah, but casually. I am analog. Said, I don't go out of my way to watch it aside from highlights. Pretty much, I just listen to Shift F1 to get the highlights from the weekend. Zaxy8771 saying, follow both, but IndyCar is my preference for sure. Jeremy from HBG saying, I used to, but since I dropped ESPN a few years ago, I don't see it. Hey, you can get F1 TV. Bill Hessa says, I don't watch the races. I don't spend 1 cent on any merchandise. My money and viewing go to IndyCar. I read about the races and stay abreast of the news because they are the competition.
Are they?
Yeah, I think F1's a different thing.
Yeah, I think so. I don't see it as a direct competitor.
Tyler_Allen says, I don't spend any money for F1, tickets, merch, etc. I also don't have ESPN, so I rarely watch an actual race, but I do pay attention to what's going on. You know what? This is interesting. There's multiple people saying they don't have ESPN. So that means these are our Peacock probably only, or they have an antenna to watch NBC and then, have Peacock for the USA and the Peacock only race. Like that segment of IndyCar and IndyCar fandom, because it's finally accessible, you have to think that's grown quite a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't see it as a competitor whatsoever. So
NK Harden says yes-ish. Watch a couple races and I follow the standings after the whole BS with Andretti, though. I'm out. F1 is full of a bunch of a-holes who love the smell of their own gas and are completely out of touch with reality.
Very nice.
So, yeah, I don't see that whole thing ending that well, but that's where we're at. And then also NK Harden sending to us, do we think, talking about the Kyle Larson news, do we think this finally gets Hendrick to dip their toes in IndyCar a bit more? They've resisted forever, but they could be a force if they went for it. Yeah, if this foray goes well, I mean, you never know.
Yeah.
Look, we saw what happened with McLaren.
Right?
And it didn't go well for them.
No, not at all.
It did the first year,
yeah.
but not when they came back alone as a standalone entry.
I know there's always been interest there. How much interest? I've never heard it from the mouth of Rick Hendrick or anything in terms of how deep this is. I don't know if the future has Rick Hendrick and Hendrick Motorsports being a standalone team in IndyCar. I don't see that as being a viable reality. But what I could see is partnerships like this with McLaren or whoever to co-sponsor a car or to co-run a car. But I don't see in 2030, for instance, a 2-car effort by Hendrick Motorsports in IndyCar. I really don't see it. I don't even see them being like an Indy only team. I just see them as being a partner, similar to what Menards and Paul Menard is. Like now he's merely a sponsor when opportunities arise. I could see that just being the same thing with Rick Hendrick.
This from Beans B-Card blog. IndyCar and NBC tweeted this back on the 1st. Nobody's gone back-to-back in IndyCar since 2011. Will Power obviously trying to change that. And he says, I'm truly unsure which is most impressive. Dario going back-to-back-to-back, Dixon's 5 titles without them back-to-back, or Power's 7 years between titles. What say you? I think to me, it's Dario, because you got to remember he went to NASCAR.
Right.
You're driving a different style car. You come back, and I get it. He won the title in 2007, but he comes to a new team.
Right.
Coming off the NASCAR foray, which did not go well, mind you. So confidence can't be great. Comes in, wins his second or third race of the season at Long Beach, and then just goes on to win 3 straight. I think what's more crazy is that Will Power was a contender 2009, 10, 11, and 12, and didn't win a title. It took until 2014. I think that's most wild part. Yeah, Dixon's never gone back-to-back, but it's so hard to do that. Like, we haven't had a back-to-back winner since Dario, right?
Correct.
So, I mean, that's really hard as far as the points race goes. Newgarden's come close a couple of times, obviously. Pagano came close, but it's not been done. And I think, to me, Will Power's run of not winning a title, I think, was in a way impressive because of how close he came year after year, which means you're really consistent.
Right.
He was winning a lot of races, but somehow couldn't win. Or I think the craziest thing to me is Elio's never won a series title.
Right. He's won 4 titles.
In IndyCar. He's won an IMSA.
Yeah.
But not in IndyCar.
Yeah, and four Indy 500. So, yeah, I think that's probably the most impressive. I think Dixon, too, I think is up there, at least in today's landscape, and people don't appreciate it because you still look at that one Indy 500 win as being that only dub. But, yeah, to me, Dixon's as impressive as well.
All right. We did have an email sent to us as well, so let me find that.
We haven't talked about this yet, but the Indy Lights jump in terms of the money, and I guess it's a welcome improvement because of the terrible situation that was 2022. It's not what it was previous, but I think it's better. And there's also money going around. So it's not very much an all or nothing thing on just the champion, but there's other money given out and all that stuff. So did you feel like that maybe lessened the blow from last year, or is there still stuff to be desired? Because the winner still, I want to say only, gets $850,000. And I don't understand whether that's the money to put to the open test and an Indy test and an Indy run, or that he gets $850K plus all that. I'm not really understanding.
So the overall budget, this from Nathan Brown, went from increase to $1.4 million from 1.2. Champion scholarship goes from $500K to $850K. So that's up, obviously. Some of the other things with this, the champion gets a test, IndyCar test on the IMS road course. They get an oval test at Texas, IMS open test, and the Indy 500, and an additional IndyCar race. And then the per race prizes will be a lot better. $15,000 for first, $5,000 for second, $2,500 for third. Before, I think it was like 5, 3, and 1 for a long time.
Yeah, it was like,
if I'm not mistaken. So that's a big bump up. So I guess we look at it as, oh, you only get $850K if you win, but you throw in the additional prize
races,
money.
yeah.
And
which I feel like
you could be approaching over 900,000.
Yeah.
At the very least.
Yeah.
It could be closer to $1 million. I mean, if you're talking all the prize money, I mean, they're running what, like 20 races sometimes? I know they've shrunk that number.
Yeah.
Looking at the schedule for
I think you got what,
2024
now?
Or excuse me, 2023.
Even less than that, I think. Maybe 14.
Yeah. So they have not as many races because they cut some of the double headers, but 14 rounds. I mean, say you get what? 6 wins. That's what, this is where we get into math. 90,000.
Yeah.
Right there. And usually when we have winners in the series, I mean, they dominate. So 6 wins is not out of the question. Plus, seconds and third. I mean, you're looking at it easily topping 100,000 in prize money in addition to the 850. So approaching $1 million is possible.
Yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction. It's not as egregious as it was last year. I don't think it's perfect, but then again, this is a junior series too. So you can only do so much when money is at a premium. And I think $1.4 million is a good investment. They're trying to even out the money, I think, a little bit more, as opposed to nobody gets anything except for the champion who gets everything. But at the same time, you need to make sure that champion is getting enough to get an opportunity in IndyCar. And I always felt like the 3-race deal was very kind. Like, I always felt like, okay, the 500 should be a thing, but 3 races, that's kind of stretching it. So I think this is a much more sensible deal. I think there could be more money involved, but the fact that you're not guaranteeing 3 races, I think, is a step in the right direction, because I never really agreed with that respect.
All right. I have our email question. This is from Don. Marketing to IndyCar's base. I recently heard a startling yet unsurprising statistic about IndyCar fans. More than half are 65 years of age or older. I know you've tackled at length about marketing, so I haven't. The ideal solution. Market to your base. Sign up sponsors who carry products like weighted blankets, bathtub bars, medical alert necklaces, shower chairs, pill splitters, adult diapers, hearing aids, flip phones, walkers, and pain relief creams. Sell IndyCar embroidered sweater vests and babushkas. Make Geritol the official IndyCar vitamin supplement. Ensure nutritional drink the official IndyCar beverage. Ensure the drink. And make butter pecan the official IndyCar ice cream flavor. I want to hear a winter driver exclaim, the Polydent Denture Cream Delora ran great today. And finally, Penske Entertainment needs to hire a crusty, grumpy old fart as the new marketing director. He'll be able to speak the vernacular. A young marketing director would only use the position as a stepping stone. That's great. That's funny. And basically, if you want that, just go to Track Forum.
Yeah, there's plenty of people that have probably just that still think message boards is the place to be on the internet. But it hits hard.
And look, I lurk on Track Forum. I'll admit it, because I'm just curious what they're thinking. And half the people are just presenting news, and then
other half
everything goes off the rails.
Yeah,
it's just like on the IndyCar Reddit page that I try to shy away from these days.
All of them are clamoring for the good old days.
Oh yeah. Well, the IndyCar Reddit page is just a bunch of, I watch F1. Now I'm an IndyCar fan. Help me. And I'm like, just use the internet. It's not that hard.
You're already on the internet. You're on Reddit.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you mean you want to follow it? Well, there's a Wikipedia page, and you can just learn the drivers.
And there's an app. No, actually, I wouldn't suggest the app on second thought. But you bring up a lot of points, because all of those things that they mentioned, I see. So I'm big into history. So the magazines I get, it's all about prescription ads and like the chairs that can raise and all that stuff.
Acorn stair lifts. That was a James Jake sponsor back in the day.
That's true.
It's his family company.
I don't know if it's still the Jitterbug, but the big phone, with the big buttons and all that stuff. And then
Life Alert.
Yes, Life Alert. And then when I'm home, because we have a 7-week-old, and sometimes I'm home during the day and the TV's on, I see all those ads too. So maybe I am the demographic I guess you should be targeting, because I'm seeing a lot of those ads. I haven't gotten a Life Alert though yet.
I'm like an advertiser's dream, because I'll remember ads and I'll want to try stuff because of an ad. And I'm still in that target demographic. Just barely.
What, the 25 to 24 to 30?
No, the 18 to
35?
34.
34?
Yeah.
So you're turning 35, so you don't matter.
34. I'm turning 30. So I'm aging
so you're
out.
Still in there. You're fine.
Yeah. So I guess I'm still relevant as far as the advertising.
I'm 40, so I'm quickly reaching that. Well, they're going to die soon, so we don't.
And you're
focus
not
on
like your wife is more the targeted one as the household. She probably does the grocery shopping and lists, right?
Yes. What are you insinuating? That I don't help at home? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm just kidding. I'm not insinuating that at all. I know you wake up in the middle of the night to take care of your crying.
Yeah, it's more often my wife too.
Infant.
But at this point, but no, we do the and completely getting off the rails. So we've done the pickup more often than not. I mean, we'll stop and do, like, if we need a couple things, but like our weekly pickup is we get it ordered and then we pick it up. We don't have it delivered. We're not that lazy, but we actually go and get it. And I tell you, it can save a hell of a lot of money when you're not wandering around the grocery store.
I like the Aldi pickup. It's great. The problem is when they start doing the substitutions, and that's where it goes off the rails for me. I like looking at the store and picking out the produce.
That is one thing. I don't like produce being chosen in that, because
especially bananas. I'm way too picky about that.
And we'd like tomatoes. We get a lot of tomatoes, and they're always like, oh man, we got to get rid of these today, so we're going to put them with the mobile order or whatever. And we hardly ever, because we shop for the week, so we get some on Monday, we may not eat it till Friday, and that tomato will be soft as all get out. But anyway, what are we talking about?
Yeah, off the rails. Time for news and notes.
Sure, what do we got?
Some things before Christmas. IndyCar has added a new front suspension piece for ovals.
Exciting.
Also, they're going to do an expanded rubbering in sessions at Texas Motor Speedway and at the racetrack formerly known as Gateway, both those from racer.com. Team official on the move. We're not going to cover all of these things, but this is noteworthy. AJ Foyt Racing VP of Operations Scott Harner will start in a management role this month at Andretti. That from Nathan Brown of the Indy Star. James Rowe, speaking of Andretti, completes the lineup for them in the series formerly known as Indy Lights, their 4-car lineup. Hunter McElroy, Jamie Chadwick, Lewis Foster, the other drivers for Andretti in Lights this year. They have 17 confirmed entries. Could expect one more, I believe. Steve Erickson, who used to be with HPD and Chip Ganassi Racing, has joined Ray Hall as their COO. It's a pretty big hire there.
Yeah.
In the offseason. Will Power will make his IMSA debut in the Rolex 24 with Sun Energy One race team. Never heard of them, but we're looking at approximately a dozen IndyCar drivers. If you want to throw in current and former IndyCar driver, I mean, that list is going to be a lot longer, but the Roar is next weekend, and then the 24 is the weekend after, I believe.
Man, already.
We're close.
Yes.
Also, this from Trackside Online, Bell Media, which I believe owns TSN in Canada, but IndyCar will be available on the new TSN Plus streaming service, plus 13 races over the air on NBC, which Canadians have access to, but they've acquired the rights for that for several things, including PGA Tour Live, IndyCar, relaunched XFL, NCAA football and basketball. So
very nice.
Tennis Grand Slams, NFL feeds, in-car cameras from F1 races, and more. So that is a new way, and hopefully this is a much better option for our Canadian fans, because before it was like Sportsnet 360 plus, and to get all practice qualifying in every race, and it cost like $20 a month or something.
Yeah,
like,
it was on top of
like
your regular cable thing.
Yeah, like a Bally deal where you had to pay a fortune. So this is, I believe, positive. I don't know the price for this.
I believe. We always have to hear from our Canadian friends.
Canadian
is this a good
friends,
thing?
Please let us know if this is good or bad.
It seems like a good thing, but what do we know?
I never know for these. It stresses me out because I just want them to have a TV and or streaming deal that actually works and is accessible and fan friendly. And they have not had that for several years.
Hopefully this is better, but let us know. Is it better?
Yeah.
It sounds better, but you know how that stuff works.
Yes.
You know, they always make things sound better.
Malcolm in the Middle star, Frankie Muniz, who raced in what was then Star Mazda back in the day, I believe.
Yeah,
he's back
Star
in
Mazda.
racing. He'll be full-time in the ARCA Menards series.
He's trying to make a run at I don't know if he can get to Cup, but at least maybe, what is it? The Xfinity series?
Mm-hmm. Rhett Jones Racing, number 30 Ford Mustang. He'll be at Daytona, so good for him.
No longer a God, what is he now? Like in his 30s?
Oh, yeah.
Man, getting old.
He's getting up there. Drive to Survive, Season 5, coming to Netflix February 24th. So we have a release date.
Okay.
So that's another update. And then an unfortunate update, Marshall Pruitt, his wife who has cancer, the cancer has returned. So there's a GoFundMe page to help him and his wife Shabral with that. She was first diagnosed with breast cancer in September 2018, then reached a point of remission, and now unfortunately it has come back. So if you want to donate to the GoFundMe, just search for that. Support Shabral and Marshall Pruitt Phase 2. That is the title of that, so you can look that up on GoFundMe. So that is the update there. Very unfortunate.
Yeah, thoughts to Marshall, man.
It just seems like the racing family has had too many cases of this the last handful of years.
Taking a lot of hits, that's for sure. But blessings to Pruitt and the wife. So hopefully things get better.
All right. Tweets of the week time. Two of them related to the Andretti F1 deal. So Adam Stern quoted this from a BBC article. Within F1, there's a general sense that many of those racing in America in categories where teams buy cars off the shelf and run them with fairly small-scale operations don't quite grasp just how high the level is in F1, how complex the task. Nick Yeoman of IndyCar Radio quoting that, saying, within America, there's a general sense that in a couple of years, the new hipster F1 fans will be interested in something else because that's what they do. And the true F1 and the true fans F1 could have made will grow frustrated by the politics, the fact 95% can't afford tickets to the races. And then Nathan Brown, same tweet here, said, one of these is a European F1 team. And it's a picture of McLaren's 2019 Indy 500 effort. The other is one of those small-scale American racing operations. Then Juncos Racing, Kyle Kaiser in 2019 for the Indy 500. No sponsors on the car besides the series stickers.
Yeah, it was a very bland car. White side
chassis,
pods.
most of which allegedly don't quite grasp just how high the level is in F1. And then Brown says, only one of them made the Indy 500. I'll let you guess who.
Well, I think the technology and money and commitment and time, all that into Formula One has no equal. But that doesn't mean that the best drivers are in Formula One or anything. So just because you're the elitist of the sport doesn't make you necessarily the best and have the best of the best. And unfortunately for Formula One, and I think it's more the fan. I just get this sense that it's more the fandom of Formula One that has their nose up in the air and looks down upon everybody else. I really don't get that sense from at least a lot of people in Formula One necessarily. I think it's more the people that follow Formula One. It's these simpletons about IndyCar or even North American motorsport going around in circles and how boring that is and all that.
I get the sense it's the fans, the team principals, outside of Zach Brown, obviously.
Yeah,
and the journalists as well. They all contribute to the arrogance and that we're better than
I think
you.
The big ones don't. Like Chris Medlin isn't that guy.
No,
you know, I don't feel like maybe it's just the ones I read that aren't like that. But I really think, in my opinion, it's very much driven, social media driven, with common people with thumbing their nose up at everybody else from Formula One. I really think that. I think you talk to the drivers. I think they respect IndyCar
for the most part. Yes.
Or at least they say the right things, you know?
Yeah.
I think I imagine if you get a couple drinks and a lot of Formula One drivers, they'd tell you some other things. I think if you got a couple drinks and some IndyCar drivers, they'd say some more derogatory things about Formula One than they would otherwise. So I think it goes both ways.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, true, because these contracts go where these guys are going to say the right thing because they have to. It's their job.
Then they will, and they maybe want another job later on down the line. That could be impact on what they say. But I just think this is a battle that's mostly fought amongst fans, I think. And social media is a big fuel to the fire in that.
Oh, you're telling me F1 Twitter's toxic?
I think, can we just say Twitter's toxic?
Oh, yeah. It absolutely is.
Yeah. Unless we have instances of like a Damar Hamlin type thing that brings everybody together. Other tthan that, it's pretty toxic out there.
Yeah, no doubt. All right. Time for the first random split era driver of the week. For 2023.
Right, we're going to bring a heavy hitter in here to start the 2023 campaign of the Random Split Era Driver of the Week. We're going 1999 in the IRL series and Ronnie John Cox.
Who?
Yes, that's why I wanted to start in 2023. Somebody that Caleb had not heard of. Ronnie John Cox out of Jackson, Michigan. And he raced...
Wait, no way.
Yes.
Are you serious?
Yes.
That is literally the hometown of my wife.
Yeah, maybe they knew each other. He was born in 1969. When was your wife born?
Not 1969. Try like
20 years
nearly,
after that? 15 years?
25 years later.
But Ronnie John Cox from Jackson, Michigan, the home of Mrs. Caleb Hatch. And we look at it was a former driver in the Indy Racing League, 8 career starts in 1999 and 2000, TriStar Motorsports in 1999, did not qualify for the 500 that year or the year after. But his high finish in 1999 was 11th at Texas. That was also his all-time best finish. It was TriStar Motorsports in 99. 2000, it was Bird McCormack Racing. Also didn't qualify for the 500. So 0 for 2 in trying to qualify for the 500. He now, this is interesting, owns and operates Technique Inc., which is a prototype metal stamping and laser cutting company based in Jackson, Michigan. And apparently produces kits to assemble the racing chassis of the car of tomorrow.
Well, the car of tomorrow.
Is the car
former
of now.
Yeah.
And
no, past, because they have the next
two
gen.
iterations. Well,
it's the next gen.
Did they do a next gen now?
I believe so.
Okay. So
I'm looking this up. Yeah, it's a business.
And many of the top teams in NASCAR, and I don't know if this is still current, but it's on Wikipedia, so it has to be true. Many of the top teams in NASCAR use Technique engineered chassis components, of which Ronnie John Cox is the owner.
So you know what's crazy is I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, I've driven by this business, not the exact road it's on, but on the interstate where it's near.
Uh-huh.
Many times.
And little did you know
Yeah.
that former IRL driver Ronnie Johncox owned that place. And interestingly enough, after he was done in IRL, dropped down to Indy Lights. You don't see that anymore, right?
No.
Not very often, at
No, we
least.
saw it with Zach Beach.
Yeah. And so he went in 2002 and 2003, raced in Indy Lights, the Indy Pro Series, 10 times, 1 pole, 3 top 5s, 8 top 10s. His last professional race, 2003 Freedom 100. Since then, it's been all about Technique Inc. for Ronnie Johncox.
That's the 2003 Infinity Pro Series Freedom 100.
Yeah,
if I'm
my
not mistaken.
apologies.
Yeah, I want to see if I can guess who won that. Was that Mark Taylor?
I have no idea. 2003 Indy Pro Series, the Freedom 100. If it's Mark Taylor, I'm done with you.
I'm looking this up right now because I got to know.
Like, why? How would you possibly know that if that's true?
Because I know the most useless information. That's why I would know. Like, it's not because I looked this up. It's just the most. Marty Roth participated in the 2003 Infinity Pro Series. Paul Dana, Mark Taylor with Panther Racing.
So did he win the 2003?
Ed Carpenter, Jeff Simmons, Scott Harrington, Billy Rote, Tiago Medeiros, who had a lot of success, Corey Witherow, a lot of familiar names. Ronnie Johncox, obviously. So I'm looking at this.
Now, Ed Carpenter won the 03.
Okay, that was my next guess.
Thank God.
Mark Taylor was the series champion, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, he was.
Still
Ed
absurd.
Carpenter third, Jeff Simmons
Still
second.
absurd that you know that.
Yeah.
Once we run out of, okay, that's what we're going to do. Once we run out of random split era drivers a week, if there's an ending to this thing,
there's not.
We're going to go random Freedom 100 winners of the week.
No, random IndyCar, Indy Lights, Atlantics drivers.
Maybe this will carry us enough that when we get to our advanced age, we'll start forgetting about modern era drivers, and we'll start going, Elio Castroneves, who's that? Who? And then I'll have to explain to you that he won 4 Indianapolis 500s.
Well, or if you're me, who thought he had won 5.
Oh, man.
Wow. All right. Well, that's the first episode of 2023.
Downhill from here.
Yes, absolutely downhill. Thanks for joining us. For Justin Kinney, I'm Caleb Hatch. We'll be back next week for the latest news in the world of IndyCar here on New Track Record Podcast.
Podcasts by Federated Media.